welcome to a Paper Street Pictures Roundtable. Today, we're going to talk about Scream 6. My name is Becky Sayers. I'm one half of the Paper Street podcast, filmmaker, and just all-around lover of slasher movies. I have some awesome people to help me talk about the Scream franchise, and specifically Scream 6 today. We have Ben McBride, who is your friendly neighborhood horror nerd, aren't we all? And the co-host of the Dead Ringers podcast. Welcome, Ben.
Thank you for having me. Glad to be here.
And we have Zena Dixon, your best friend who loves horror movies. She's known as the real queen of horror and co-host of the Bloody Disgusting podcast. Thanks, Zena, for joining us.
Thank you so much. Hello.
And last but certainly not least, we have Ari Drew, who is a writer for Bloody Disgusting, the High Queerness founder, and mega Scream stan. So I couldn't think of anyone better to join this conversation. Thanks for coming in, Ari.
Thanks for having me. It's great to be here with y'all.
Cool. All right. So I do want to give like the warning to people watching. There will be spoilers at some point. We are going to dive into a media discussion about Scream 6. So if you haven't seen the movie, stop, go watch it, and then come back here and tell us all your thoughts about it in the comments. And we look forward to seeing that. But first, we're going to talk about the Scream franchise in general quickly. I would love to know from each of you what your relationship is to this franchise. For a lot of people, it was very foundational for their love of horror, or maybe it's just it was the first time there had been a slasher and a great slasher movie in a long while, and so it reinvigorated people's love for that subgenre. So, from each of you, would love to know more about its influence, and we'll start with you, Ari, to share.
Yeah, so I was always a big fan of horror as a kid growing up. But there was a period of time kind of in the 90s when I was in elementary school where I was not allowed to watch horror movies. And so I really didn't watch them for a while. And I remember this Scream, the original, was actually my first movie back into horror. Once I, really found myself coming back to the genre. And the great thing about it for me is that I have always loved slashers. I've loved Halloween's one of my favorite films. I love Nightmare. Is that it just kind of was a love letter to all of these films that I'd loved before. And I really resonated with that. And really, I mean, the opening scene, I had never seen anything like it before, executed in quite that way. And so, yeah, for me, it really just kind of was a reinvigoration of my love for the genre, and allowed me to kind of revisit a lot of the old films that made me a fan to begin with. And it's just remained just a staple in who I am and inspired me creatively. And yeah, I just love it.
Oh, I love that. And that opening scene too was definitely influential for me. I remember watching it at a young age with my father and him turning to me and going, "Are you sure you're okay to keep watching?" And I was like, yes. So glad you called that moment out in particular. How about you, Zena?
Oh man, okay, let's take a little memory lane trip, to when I was 8 or 9 years old. And at that age, I was trying to watch everything horror at the time. My mom is like a huge horror fan, so it's just kind of like, you can watch it if you want to type of thing, right? Yeah, I know. And I remember I was watching a lot of really cheesy slasher movies around that time. And I just thought that she was so cool and modern and fashionable, and she had fabulous hair. So I'm like, wow, this is really cool. So for me, it kind of put me on the path of watching more slasher movies, because I've never seen anything like that. Even kind of like with Ari, what he mentioned with it being like that opening scene, it's just so iconic. Still to this day, I know of some people who's maybe for some reason they haven't seen the movie, right? And which is so crazy. But say if they haven't seen the movie and they'll watch it, they're new to the franchise, and they get creeped out by it, or they absolutely love that opening. It's just very timeless.
Yeah, and for you, Ben, and now you're going to let us down if you're like, oh, I'm not a big fan of the franchise.
Yeah. I prefer Scary Movie over Scream. No, I'm kidding. Scream was, horror has always been a big part of my life. Like it was never something that was necessarily driven by anyone else. I was always just, I went to the library, was attracted to like Goosebump books, artwork, Richie Tinker's like Cusick books, like all that kind of stuff. And I loved Halloween. When Scream came out, it just kind of reinforced that love, because it was kind of like, hey, I'm a huge horror nerd, and I see so many horror nerd references and stuff that are really, really smart happening on the screen in front of me. And at the time I was, let's see, it was in 96. So I think it was around 14, 15. Somehow I still saw it in the theater, despite my parents never really letting me watch R-rated films. But it was something that just kind of like, that definitely reinforced the horror nerd in me. And it became a thing where like the populace was also talking about it. And so it was kind of like a cool moment where I'm like, yeah, I know what you guys are talking about. I've been talking about these movies for like, for a long time. And being able to celebrate being a horror nerd through Scream was pretty awesome. And then I also watched it with my dad, and he checked out pretty early because of the first scene. So I also learned that my dad will not watch horror movies with me because he just can't handle it. So.
Yes, I find we usually have some connection to a family member with horror, whether it's like they hate them or they love them, and sometimes that draws us more or away from them. I think something really interesting that you said, Ben, is that it kind of, Scream helped popularize the genre in a way that it made the language of horror something you could talk about with a broad audience, not just like people like us who are hyper nerds about the genre. But I love that because it really brought, as Ari mentioned too, it like introduced a lot of people to classics, or made them want to go back and revisit them and watch them in a new way to see how you could trace the influence. So I think it's interesting to think about, Scream as kind of a connective tissue between modern horror and some of the classics, especially in the slasher genre. I'd love to talk about kind of its impact going forward. Obviously, there was kind of a bit of a rise of slashers in the late 90s and early aughts, like the I Know What You Did Last Summer's Urban Legend. It was on trend for a hot minute, and then kind of Ghost took over again. But do you think that modern horror would look a lot different without Scream? One thing I think about a lot is something like the popularity of A24 being about like a lot of trauma now is the trope. But I would say like the Scream films have been about trauma since before it was cool. So I find that like that Kevin Williamson's deep-rooted character work beyond just the horror references has something that has also been really impactful. So would love your thoughts on like how you see it as shaping horror since its debut in 1996. Whoever wants to start first can go.
Oh, we got silence. No one knows when to speak. I mean, it definitely like impacted horror in like a huge way, just even from the perspective of like, from a business standpoint, it was like, oh, this something got really popular, made a lot of money, like we should do this again, ad infinitum. And but it was definitely like something that like we got I Know What You Did Last Summer almost directly out of this one. And we had this huge boom of just really popular horror for a while. And I don't know, it feels like it's a specific era. Like there, you can go back and be like, oh yeah, that's like the Scream era of horror, which tends to be late 90s, early 2000s. And you've got all sorts of like teen horror sprouting out, everything from like Cherry Falls, Disturbing Behavior, stuff like that. That it's all these like these characters that are kind of quippy, and you try to enjoy their kind of back and forth, and it seemed to be like a formula that was then created post Scream. and that everyone tried to like get in on, as far as like, and we saw that happen a lot, you know, even after Halloween, Friday 13th, everything just kind of like started to repeat itself in a way, and different textures, different writers' voices started appearing throughout that. So it pretty much just, it had a direct jump start to the whole genre. So I would say, yeah, it's incredibly influential.
Yeah, do you all
Yeah,
think? Oh, go ahead, Zena.
go ahead if you're
No,
gonna
you go.
Okay. I was gonna say, well, I agree with Ben. You know, even again, I know I keep on bringing up Sydney like I'm like a crazy super fan, but even when you think about her character alone, again, like she's very modern. You know, she wasn't hypersexual, or she wasn't like, you know, well, why are you in the woods type of thing. And it felt very modern, because even when I would watch, like, you know, throwing it back to even Friday the 13th, I'm thinking to myself, I would never be in the woods. That's how I feel type of thing, you know. And so it just, and then even with Nightmare on Elm Street, it's kind of like, well, that wouldn't happen. That's more supernatural, you know. So with Scream, it felt very like real. And like Kevin Williamson, he's just clearly just so awesome, just such an incredible writer, because he was able to tap into that. Like, you know, Sydney could have been anyone type of thing. And I feel like that's why it was very much universal. So yeah, I definitely feel like it like impacted the genre at a large, because before that it was kind of like, she even said in the movie, you know, stupid slasher movies, instead of, you know, running out the door, she's running up the stairs, and it's true, or tripping over air, like how did you fall, you know? So it's a really awesome thing.
Yeah, I will echo all of that, and I think I'll just add to that. I think the big thing, and Zena, I'm glad you called out Kevin, because he's like one of my creative icons and has been since Scream, because I think he just has such a really sharp awareness of the genre in a really self-referential, smart way, but also of just writing characters that you care about. And Scream, you know, even the first Scream, there's a large chunk of time where we're just spending time with the characters and no one dies after Sydney's attack. So I think that's a testament to how much we relate to and like these people, as opposed to just viewing them and like, who is this one again? Oh, that person died. You know, the focus was less on the shock of the kill and more on the characters. And not that that wasn't the case ever in past movies, but I think it really brought the focus back to that, and it gave us kind of permission as an audience again to love the characters, and then feel really horrible whenever they died, the people we loved. And we've seen that across the franchise. But I think too, with regard to like the meta-ness of it all, and that influence that it had, I think that, you know, bringing that awareness to the tropes and the really tired kind of repetitiveness of different aspects of the genre at that point in time, especially, horror was, you know, it felt very redundant and it felt really dead for a lot of people. And so I think it was kind of the jolt that the genre needed to really think about, okay, how can we start doing things differently now? How can we, now everyone's aware of our secrets and our tropes, and so how do we start subverting that a bit? And I do definitely think that the genre would have taken maybe some really different directions without that kind of necessary mirror being held up to it, with that was Scream.
I love that, the mirror being held up to it metaphor, which is fantastic and suitable for Scream. And want to echo to Sydney, we have to talk about her just as the final girl, because she is probably my favorite final girl of all time. There are many great ones. Gotta love Jamie Lee. Gotta love Amy Steele in Friday 13th Part 2. Nancy Thompson, you know, we could go on and on. But I think, Zena, what you said about Neve Campbell's performance and the way she's written by Kevin Williamson, she's not only like relatable to where you feel like you could be her, but she's like she's smart, but not ever like so smart that you're like, oh, that's not a real person saying those things. That's a quippy teenager, you know, kind of like a Diablo Cody style dialogue maybe or something, which is fun in its own thing, but it's not the balance that I think Kevin Williamson struck with a lot of these characters. And you know, she's also, I think, one of the like I always say, she's a straight up brawler in these movies. Like she fights back, and you know, the number of times she just straight punches Ghostface in this franchise is amazing. And I think also with the killer Ghostface being like more like able, like you see Ghostface fall and flounder a lot more because it's a very human like killer than a lot of the other slashers where they're so superhuman. And of course, Kevin Williamson does a great job of addressing those superhuman elements in a meta sort of way. But I think the way like Sydney as like a strong individual is paired against Ghostface as like a very human killer, even though anonymous, like make you feel like, oh yeah, I could be in there fighting with her.
For sure.
Yeah. Speaking, you know, setting 6 aside, I'd love to kind of know how you feel about the rest of the franchise, kind of 1 through 5, and like, do you have a favorite? Is it the original? I'm really curious for those where the original is not their favorite, or I always say I don't pick favorite children when it comes to the Scream franchise, because I love them all in very different ways. And I think the Scream franchise has done an amazing job of commenting on horror in a new way every era. So it manages to stay relevant, even though we associate it with that 90s little resurgence in slashers. You know, here we are, like 2023, it just had its record opening, so it clearly has new things to say that resonate with people. But yeah, does anybody have a favorite, first of all, that is not the original film?
Yes.
You do, okay. What is it?
No, I don't want to go first.
Oh, I mean, I can't properly answer that question because I do love the original so much that I think Scream and Scream 2 are for me are on even footing. I can't claim Scream 2 is better than Scream because it took what came from before and built on it. So it would be really hard to say that Scream isn't as good as Scream 2. But I do think Scream 2 in my mind is like it's such a smart and matured some of the themes, some of the dynamics of the original. And it's just really jam-packed. And it furthers what I love about the Scream franchise in that it's like it really is about the characters, to the point of like, you know, I think some people kind of rag on Scream 3. I like it. And it has to do with like, I want to revisit these characters. Like you can throw all the meta stuff in, you know, change it up, do different things. But I love following Sydney, Dewey, Gail, and just seeing what they're up to. Like, you know, Dewey and Gail, I'm like every time they're like, you know, fighting or, you know, about to make up, I'm just like, yeah, do it, please. Like, just fall in love and get married, you know, that kind of thing.
It's almost like you'd want to see them in between all the Ghostface attacks. Like I'd watch a movie about just their like a comedy or a romantic comedy about these characters because I love them so much. I want to see what they're doing.
So my kind of answer is Scream 2. Like, but I can't say it's better than Scream.
Well, there's no wrong answer. That's the good thing. Okay, Zena, you go next.
Well, I want Ari to go. Now I'm scared.
Why are you scared? All right, Ari, you go for
I'm
it.
happy to go. Sure. Yeah, so I'm actually gonna echo Ben, but with more like definitively 2 is my favorite in the franchise. I've seen them all an innumerable amount of times at this point. But 2 for whatever reason, because again, 1 does so many novel things and really shocking things, and I think you know, like Ben said, like it really just kind of amps it up to 11 and 2, and I actually think in a lot of ways it perfects a lot of the things that 1 presents, and it's just such a fun ride. I remember sneaking in with a cousin of mine because I was, you know, I don't even remember how old, 11 or something when 2 came out. And we saw it in theaters, and it was a really like massively fulfilling experience. And I don't remember having that much fun in the theater up until that point in my life. And so I think it just kind of nailed everything that I wanted in that type of movie. The characters were fantastic, the humor was great, it was really suspenseful. It's one of the scariest in the franchise, I think.
That car
And it just
scene
has,
is good.
oh gosh, it's just the car scene, and then like before, like the AV room scene, and just all of it leading into one another. It just really gets your, your blood pumping. And so it has always held that special place in my heart. But Becky, I have recently stolen your, like, I don't pick favorite children response, because it's just easier. And the thing with these films is that I just love that they all have really established their own identities. They're all so different. And I think that's a product of, both the teams behind them, and also just when they are able to exist and when they've come out, and being reflective of the times too. So yeah, but I will say more definitively two is probably my favorite.
The pressure's on, Zena.
Can't escape now,
Yeah.
Zena.
Well, okay. I too am going to steal Becky saying you can't pick your favorite child. Like, that's bananas. But it also depends on my mood. One, the first one is iconic. Like, and let me just say, clearly we all, I'm pretty sure we all agree, maybe, I don't know, that there is no bad Scream movie, So because of that, I'm gonna say that 4 is my favorite. And it depends, but let me tell you why. I have a theory. So when I first saw it, like I said, I did have an appreciation for it, but I feel like a lot of it did kind of go over my head. I was a kid. So it's understandable. Like, now I can go back and watch it and just like perfection. But obviously when I did check out, 4 back in 2011, I was grown. So I just thought that it was, for me, I could relate to it, in that social media. I wasn't in high school, but, I could relate to it in that social media, modern kind of world type of thing, And plus, I just like the characters, I like the dorky geek kids. Well, the dorky kids who like the filmings and stuff like that. That was me, So it's just very fitting.
I love that you bring up a good point that, for a long while now, there's like a Scream film for every era, like wherever you are at in your life, like it might influence your relationship to the film, obviously. And I also want to say that Scream 4, like, is one that that one is such a fine wine of a film, where I think I had like a mixed reaction to it when I first saw it back in 2011. And then every revisit, every time I watch it again, I'm like, oh, this is smart. You pick up on all the little things that they did. And
Right.
I do find that with most Scream films, that is a similar case. There is no bad Scream film, because there's always something interesting going on in those films. And even the ones like I wasn't as thrilled about at first, I think they all have merit, and they're all a good time. They're all fun. Even if you do, setting aside the intellectual, components of it, the characters, all of that, they're just fun movies.
Great.
All right, so 5, let's talk about Scream 5. And this will be the last thing before we get into Scream 6, because I think it's kind of important to understand like how you felt about 5, and like any expectations maybe you had, going into 6. And I'll start with me, where like Scream 5 was the film I probably had was like had the least initially good experience with in theaters. But I've rewatched it 4 times since then. And again, it's like, I appreciate it more and more each time. But it's really, a new era. It's a new team of filmmakers with 5 and 6. So it's going to have a new flavor, take some getting used to. So for me, like, there's things I loved about 5, and then some things I wasn't so fond of. We'll start this time with Ari. What was your relationship and journey with Scream 5?
Yeah, so I the first time I saw it, it was at a very there was just a few people at a press screening when we saw it, and my experience of watching 4 in theaters was such a lively experience, and we had such a, like, I walked out of there with no doubt in my mind, like, oh my god, I love this movie, that was so fun. And 5, because of that adjustment, I think, to the new characters and the new vibe of it, initially I walked out just feeling really overwhelmed. I think I was kind of like, this is such a buildup for 2 decades, and as a major stan, and I've watched all these movies so many times leading up to it, and we never thought we would get another one after West Pass. So it was really surreal. It was really kind of hard to fully take it in. But I had a goal. I was like, I'm going to watch this movie 5 times in theaters. Like, that is my goal. And so I did. And the more I watched it, the more I fell in love with it. I love, I actually really felt very seen with Sam and Tara being leads, and then seeing them interact with the new cast, or the original cast, the trio. Seeing like Latino women on screen and like kicking ass and being amazing, like, was so I don't know, there was just something about it that was so fulfilling for me, that even then, like, seeing like some of the reactions to Melissa and as the lead and all that, like, it was personally like very offensive to me, I guess. And I love her, and I think she kicks ass even more in 6. I think she's amazing. But that was just really the big thing for me, is seeing that representation. Like, it does matter, and like, people don't, I don't think they really understand. You don't understand it until it's like there, until you have that frame of reference that makes you feel seen. And so, in a lot of ways, I think that that's what 5 did for me. But initially, it was just kind of like a whirlwind. I was like, I liked what I experienced. I had some amazing moments. I love seeing the trio back. I think the opening is like one of my favorites. It's really fantastic, and it's a great subversion of what you would expect from an opening. But honestly, like, I've seen this movie like 40 times at this point. Like, I watched it quite a bit. If you've ever followed any podcasts I've been on about Scream or anything. So yeah, but yeah, I came into 6 having been a pretty strong fan of 5.
Well, Zena, I'll let you go last, just because it sounds like you
I
want
just
the
get
build
really overwhelmed.
All right, Ben, how about you?
I went into Scream 5 with a lot of enthusiasm, because I liked Ready or Not a lot, and so I was interested to see what Radio Silence did with this one. And my first experience with it was pretty enthusiastic. Like, I enjoyed a lot of it. Upon like repeat viewings, it kind of starts to fall apart for me a little bit. I think there's some incredibly smart things in it, and then there's some things I'm a little less enthused about. But one of that is just the characters. For me, it was almost kind of like all the Scream movies have like those characters that I really care about and want to follow. Scream 5 is like, it's kind of there, but not fully for me. And then as we get into the next one, like, it came back for me in Scream 6. But so to me, Scream 5 feels like growing pains from going from Wes Craven to the new guys. All that being said, though, I like it. Like, I think it's true, there isn't a bad Scream movie yet. So it's just right now, I think it sits at the bottom for me. But given the context of the Scream franchise, like, it's still like, that's still up there. So it's a little iffy in parts for me, but other than that, I do enjoy it.
All right, Zena. Moment of truth. Zena's verdict on 5. Let's go.
Similar to Ben, like, when I first heard about, when they first made the announcement about 5 and Radio Silence being attached, I was completely for it. I love Ready or Not so much. Like, the pacing just fits so perfectly. And at the time, without going down a long, I like story time, but I'll save it. Around the time when the movie came out last year, I was actually taking the month off just to kind of like reset and everything like that. But horror never sleeps, so you have to go. So you have to go check it out. And I remember I was able to check it out like a week early or something like that, which was so awesome. Just having the theater to yourself, and I completely fell in love with it. I'm not saying it's perfect. There is one major thing that just like completely breaks my heart. And it's like, why, type of thing. Rip my shirt off running down the street because I'm so sad. But I really enjoyed it because it felt like, something that Wes would have approved, it still had that feel for me. And, I love the characters. I love the 2 sisters, seeing them on screen. I love their relationship, the friend group, they're familiar with a little extra spice, and of course, Mindy's awesome. Like, she's everything. Once again, a film, she's one of us, know? Also, this is jumping ahead, but I've been really trying to update my letterbox a whole lot more because of 6, because I want that personality trait. But yeah, I really enjoy it. And it's kind of hard to like put it up there in the ranking for me, but I will say it is high on the list for me. Just because I had like a lot of fun with it at the time, just checking it out in theaters. And I really love like the two sisters. Like I love their relationship and I love their characters. And it's mean, so that's always fun.
Yeah, and I think 5 and 6 are best talked about together, right? Because really, and I think Ben, you know, some of what you alluded to, and that you were like, it felt very transitional, right? Like starting to get to know these new characters, and then I don't think we really feel like, you know, maybe I shouldn't say everyone feels this way, but for me, I know like it was like I didn't feel like I really knew them and understood them until 6, and that it like all really gelled for me. And now
I
go
agree.
back and watching 5 after seeing 6, I'm like, oh, like I know them now. So now I'm like, oh yeah, like they just feel more like the legacy characters used to for me, where I'm like, oh, I love you. Oh, that's such a you moment, kind of a thing where you feel like you could, you know, go to dinner and watch a movie with these people and like you can anticipate their behavior. I guess that's a good segue into Scream 6. We should get to that since that is the topic at hand. So you know, we've talked a lot about like the openings of the Scream films being like, you know, one of the things that first like gets us roped in and like engaged in the movies. I definitely want to talk about the cold open for Scream 6 because it is one of my favorites of the franchise, may eventually become my favorite. You know, Samara Weaving, of course, Ready or Not, I didn't know how she was going to be in this movie, was not expecting that, but in great tradition, you know, of having a fairly recognizable cast member in the cold open is kind of a Scream tradition. So it was fun to see her with her accent too. That was a joy. And then of course the moment where the mask gets ripped off for the first time in a Scream movie, we're like, are they revealing the killer right away? Did you all think that, like, what were your thoughts in that moment? I had like all my fan theories were like spinning out of control, and I had a billion things going on in my brain about what it could mean.
Yeah, I definitely would. For probably about 30 seconds, I was like, wait, are we gonna know the identity the whole time? Like that'll be interesting. Like, okay, let's try it. And then I was like, nope, nope, there's another guy. There's gonna be more death here shortly. So so yeah, that it almost had me for a second. I was like, oh, this is different. Like I'm interested. I mean, if they do that down the road, like I'm open to it. Like I'd be curious to see how they do that. But I mean, Scream's always been about the reveal and like the mystery of like who is it. So
Yeah.
that would be tough to do. I think if you really wanted to do it, but hey, I'm game.
Yeah, I felt the same way. I thought that we were going to know who the killer, you know, was like ahead of time and everything like that. But then when it took that, you know, turn, he went back to his apartment and it's like, okay, film nerd, you know? So it's just like there has to be like another killer. His friend or whoever that he thinks he's talking to, his body's gonna pop up, you know, somewhere any moment. And going even back to Samara Weaving, I know like a lot of people, they were disappointed. They're like, oh, I wish I would have, you know, we would have been able to see her more. But you know what? I think that is just, I know I've been using the word iconic so much, but I'm going to use it one more time. I just feel like it is so iconic because she's among the greats, you know? Think about who was in that opening. Like that is just so amazing, you know? It's just like, wow, look at them. And I don't know, it feels good because they, you know, brought her back for us to see her, you know, ready or not. So
Yeah.
Yeah,
It's an honor to be in that
I
role,
think so
right?
too. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I felt the same way, Zena. Like I think watching it when I saw her pop up, I'm like, oh shit, she's gonna die. But like being so like intrigued by like, but how? Like what's gonna happen? And I think, you know, the mask coming off, I stopped like really kind of engaging in fan theories with 4. I probably a little bit before 4. I just found that like I don't want to set myself up to like be disappointed by having these ideas really rooted in my mind. So I kind of felt like they're gonna have to do something different here. And so when she died, I was like, oh, that was kind of quick. And then the mask comes off, and I was like, there it is. That's the thing. So and I thought that was really just lovely to watch. and Tony Revolori's, you know, seeing a boy, you know, the opening kill be a boy getting a call. It's like, it's since Cotton we haven't seen that really. So I thought
Yeah.
that was really great and a nice subversion, and it's a testament to kind of the movie saying, hey, what this kind of motivation and motives that we set up in 5 with Richie and Amber being super fans and the toxic fandom, and this is all about the movies. And then the killer's like, who gives a fuck about movies? I don't know if I can curse on this, I'm sorry, but
Oh yeah, it's fine.
but I love that because it's literally like symbolically, it's like kind of saying, hey, this is not going to be what happened in the last movie. Like we're not doing that. And so I thought that was just a really great way of kind of like setting the stage for this new setting and just the vibe this time around, which was very different. And I just thought it was fantastic.
Yeah, it was definitely a tone setter, and you could just feel the atmosphere in the theater like changing in a good way though. Everyone's like, what's happening? But oh my God, I'm so intrigued. So I love that. And then want to talk about the core 4 as well, the which I love that, you know, we can now use that term and everybody knows what we're talking about. And you know, we've talked a little bit about them in the context of Scream 5 with Sam, Tara, Mindy, and Chad being the core 4 characters, the survivors of the previous Woodsboro attack, and they dubbed themselves the core 4, and now it's like you read that everywhere. So it clearly stuck. But yeah, as I was saying earlier, like I really felt like I knew them going into this, and like I was already rooting for them from the start. And it was just, it spends a lot of time with them in this film. Like there's a lot of heart to heart kind of moments in this. It almost as much as like maybe the first Scream, I think had I haven't done like a serious breakdown in terms of runtime on the Scream films, but I feel like this probably has the most like kind of like downtime with the characters of any Scream film besides the first one, and I loved every minute of it. I wanted to see more, like we were talking about. I would see Dewey and Gail, like I want to know about their life in between the ghost face slashings, and it's like, oh, I kind of just want to hang out with them at college.
Same.
Yeah, very much.
I really wanted to go to that party.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. And for me too, like I think this one really solidified just kind of the way I felt when I saw 2, and you get to see everyone come back. And it was so soon after 1 that 2 came out. But it still felt like I had been wanting it because I loved 1 so much, and seeing them like really come into their own and all like know themselves. The performers too, just like you can tell they know themselves. The writers, I recently got to interview James Vanderbilt, and who's one of the writers, and he, you know, they were talking about how they were really pleasantly surprised that the studio wasn't like, no, this is too much character stuff like in a row. Like there's a lot that is, and for a movie that feels really kind of pretty fast paced, like once it hits the ground, it really hits the ground running. But there's so much to care about, and there's so many lovely moments. And he said that the studio was just like, leave it, we get it, like it works better that way, and it really does. And I'm so glad that, you know, that we're not facing that same kind of studio drama that really plagued, I think, like 3 and 4 behind the scenes, with the Weinsteins kind of pushing back on everything essentially. So it's just nice to see a studio have faith in what this is, which is really like a character, you know, these are really character driven stories, and 6, I think, just kind of nails that in that way.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest successes of 6 for me, is just that return to form as far as like caring about the characters, because I think that it was one of the biggest strengths of the you know, especially the original 3 for me, is just following those characters. So giving me that I mean, it's not even something that's like, it's like fresh ideas. Like if you make me care about these characters, the tension ranks up so much higher because I'm invested. I need to see that they get through it. So it just makes the movie all that much better. So so them kind of calling out the core 4 in this, like to me, it felt like the screenwriters were like, yeah, we recognize that this is an element of Scream. We need to have this in here. And now it's something that I'm like, okay, when they do Scream 7, I'm like, I'm going to be further invested, and they can play up those character dynamics even further. And like, I'm be scared for anyone to die. Like, I was like, don't do it. Like, you know. So yeah, I think that was one of my favorite aspects of this new one, was just like going back to what makes, like, give me the meta, give me all the scary slasher fun, but like I need to care. So I'm glad that he did that.
I mean, I agree with what everyone said, and I love the name Core 4, and again, it's so cool that we all know what that is. But I love the fact that they all decided to go to literally the other side, halfway across, the country type of thing, just so they could be together. And that makes a lot of sense. You've been through something so crazy. I don't see, you wanting to separate and stuff like that. But yeah, I love seeing them together. I keep on going back to the party, but like I really want to go to that party. It just it looked really fun, So, and this is kind of jumping ahead, but I kind of like how they introduce the characters again. We briefly see Tara, and she's clearly like living her life, as she should be, on her way and everything like that. Then when we do see like the twins, it's just good to see them again.
Yeah, you do get a little like it does kind of reintroduce you to them, and they're still themselves, but with this added experience from the fifth film. So they all are carrying with them various approaches to being a survivor and coping with that. And I think it does a great job of like, it even calls out, like they say themselves that they understand they're all processing their respective like traumas, and each went through something maybe unique from each other, but also somewhat of a shared experience, and they're all allowed to do that differently. And I think it's great that we're now at a time where we don't have to that doesn't have to just be subtext, like as human beings, I think like that type of vernacular is more common now, so we can literally have characters say that to one another, which is beautiful. And I think the other thing, by identifying them as the core 4 and giving us this chance to get to know them, not only raises the stakes, as has been said, for future films, but also I felt like this was the first time I felt like I'm okay not seeing the legacy characters in another film. Whereas in the fifth film, to me, those legacy characters were like some of the best parts of the film, and I cannot imagine that, it would have been hard for me to just have totally new characters now. I'm like, oh, I would watch a movie with just them. I would. Obviously, we still want to like have some connective tissues to all these like characters that have been planted from the legacy. And I'm not saying I want them all to die or anything, but I feel like they can carry it. They can take the torch, to use a quote from the fifth film, going forward.
Yeah, I completely agree with that. And I think even as much as I love 5, and again, these films, the rewatches of them, you always get something different. And I've seen now 6 4 times in theaters, and I have 2 more times that I want to see it. And I'm trying to hit my 6 for 6, but even just like immediately, and I saw 2, 3 of those watches, I want to say were like 3 days in a row, and every time I enjoyed so many. Like, I still was stressed out by the latter scene. I still was like really like my blood was pumping in the subway scene. The finale gets better for me every time I watch it. There's so many fun like little quippy one-liners throughout the whole movie that I find myself now already saying. And so I think that's a testament to these movies, and just kind of like how much there is to really just explore and unpack and love about even just the amount of care put into dialogue and characterization, and the things that we love. Like, we love hearing Ghostface say some really nasty stuff on a call, and we love hearing our characters like say some shit back and really fight back. And that's something in this movie that I think I just got everything I wanted from it, on all fronts, like in that way.
And I enjoyed, and this is something that started in 5, but they carry it over in 6, is like, so we have our Sidney Prescott character with essentially Samantha Carpenter, but even though we're getting a new character, she's not Sidney Prescott. She's very different, to the point of like, there was in previous Scream movies, there was always some consideration of like, is there an idea or concept of Sydney going, kind of going off the deep end, like she's had too much trauma and she's going to kill everybody. Well, now we have our final girl who actually is now starting, who also has like elements where she's like, do I enjoy this? And she's got, she's afraid of her lineage, and so there is a setup for the potential of like, could she actually become a killer at some point? I don't know if we're ever going to see that turn, but they at least are offering like credible like steps towards like something like that, where even if they throw it at you as like, just kind of like a thing to throw you off, you might actually be like, oh crap, I don't know, maybe she is. And then even her sister, like at the end, like it almost, to me, it's almost seemed like she was like, I think I kind of like that too. Like she had a moment of like, it looked like she was like upset, but then she kind of liked it at the same time. So, yeah, there's an interesting dynamic happening in the building of those characters that I hope they continue to play with that, in future installments.
100%. I do want to, like Ari touched on a few things. I do want to talk about the New York City setting because we haven't mentioned it yet. Saw a lot of different feedback about this from fans. People are saying, some people said there wasn't enough New York in it. Some people, and I don't know if they're commenting on the fact that they didn't shoot every scene in action, like on location in New York City, or that they just, they wanted to see like a big Times Square scene, like a Jason Takes Manhattan set piece or something. But for me, I got the vibe of New York in the subway scene, in the bodega scene, in the ladder scene in the apartments, and like just that urban, to me, like when I think about the idea and what I imagine the intent of the script wasn't to be like, hey, we're in New York City postcard. It's more the idea of, even in this like hyper urban environment where there's tons of people around, you're still not safe. And I think if that was the goal, they were successful. It's not a showcasey New York movie though, and it wouldn't feel right to me. Were you all satisfied by the New York elements, or let down by the marketing teams, the representation of it?
I mean, they put direct reference to Jason Takes Manhattan in the movie with a scene from it, which again, that movie is like, where is New York in that movie? Like it's like there
the
for
very
half
end.
a second.
Right.
So on that scale, Scream 6 out like blew that out of the water. Like to me, I don't know that I agree with like there wasn't enough New York, just because I was like, do you want it to be more public? I don't know what the argument is there. The subway scene is great. It's a good New York segment. It works really well. There's even just the nature of like, New York has a lot of people don't have time to pay attention to you, so all he needed to do was cover her mouth to prevent the scream, and he could stab her. And like that to me felt like, I don't want to say that's a very New York thing, because that sounds terrible and not true.
Happens every day.
but
Only in New York.
It seems like it could happen though, because of the dense nature of the city. And then the ladder scene, you mentioned that as well. Like that's also a fantastic set piece, and that is something that felt something that might happen in New York, like having to escape a tall building and your only way is out the window. How do you do that? So I thought it played a pretty good role in the movie itself. Gave it a slightly different flavor. So I was all for it.
Yeah, like I really love the fact, again, going back even to the core four, I love the fact that they all decided to go to New York City. And, as a New Yorker who lives in Florida now because it's cheaper, I would just say, I think that there was enough New York in there. I like, kind of like what was stated, I don't know what people wanted. Like, people who actually live there don't really go to Times Square, don't really go to do like the touristy things. But yes, you're going to take the subway because it's convenient. And then on top of that, I even saw like somebody was saying how come, no one called the police if they heard someone screaming. Yeah, that sometimes that just doesn't, I know that sounds terrible. It does, but it happens, it's kind of not all of New York, but it's kind of like the place where people do kind of like mind their business. There's always like a lot of like craziness that's happening. Even with the subway scene, again, it's kind of like some are like super packed depending on what time you go. And it's also around Halloween because there's parties, there's bar hopping, you know what I mean? There's always types of stuff going on. So kind of like was already stated, yes, someone could just cover her mouth and no one would really even notice. And you know what I mean? So there's that. And there was one more thing I was going to say, but then I just started going down a rabbit hole thinking about Jason Takes Manhattan for some reason.
Can we just rename it to be Jason Walks into Manhattan ... at the end?
At the end.
Yeah.
Jason sightsees in Manhattan.
I will, Zena, I will like hop on that because I did my undergrad in New York and I lived there for a little over 4 years. And again, like I would never have considered myself a New Yorker, but I lived there, and like I lived there as a poor person who didn't have, I wasn't doing touristy stuff. I wasn't doing a lot, but like going to the bodega or going to St. Mark's and getting a $2 slice of pizza. Like, I think what I appreciate about this is that like it did feel like a lived in version of New York, not, oh my God, we're here for the first time, let's go to Times Square, let's go to 30 Rock, let's go to the Statue of Liberty. I think that would have been so not true to what that experience is actually like for people when they get there and go to college. And so I really appreciated it. I thought that they did a great job of representing kind of really key moments that make it, like the bodega scene, I really love. And again, I think with some distance from the marketing, rewatching this, people will probably start looking at some of these scenes in really different ways, because that's a pretty fantastic scene. And there's just a lot that's very representative of New York. And it is that city where you could live there, you could move there, and no one could know you exist ever while you live there. And it's really easy. That's something that they would like tell us in college, like, hey, be sure to socialize, meet people. You don't want to get lost basically in all the crowds, because if you don't have those connections, it can be very scary and very isolating. And I think this film just did a lovely job of touching on all that. So no, those complaints, I'm like, I don't know if y'all wanted like a Broadway number or something, but that's not this franchise.
Sorry, I do want to see it. Maybe it's a future Stab movie,
there you go.
musical.
I do want to say real quick, I remember what I was going to say. I was going to say, I love the fact too that they didn't kind of like age this type of thing. So like say if they're like, oh, what, they didn't have this restaurant, everybody who lives in New York goes it. What if it goes out of business? And plus not every New Yorker doesn't have like the same type of experience, but for the most part, it is kind of like the subway is included. Bodegas are like everywhere, you know what I mean? And it's pretty packed. So I feel like they had like the elements, like the fundamental elements that was needed for this,
Totally agree. It sounds like we're on the same page. I don't know what those other people were expecting, so we're right, they're wrong. Just kidding. So I want to get to the killer reveal, because I think this is probably the most divisive part of the movie, from casually talking with people, where a lot of people, I loved it, except I didn't like the killer reveal. There's a lot of folks that felt like they had predicted at least part of it, and that, and the Scream movies are known for being like, whodunits that are difficult, and they have some good things that really throw you off. But I always like to say, they tell you who the killer is pretty obviously, and then when you go back and rewatch, you're like, how did I not know? And this is definitely one of those. But yeah, like what were your, like, did any of you feel like, oh, that was too easy to predict, or did you know it going in, or I'm curious what your reactions were.
I did not predict it. When it was revealed, I was waiting for them to give the explanation, or like, okay, who are you, why are we doing? But so far with the radio silence movies, they seem to be mimicking a little bit their respective sequels. Scream 5 goes back to the original. Scream 6 feels like Scream 2. It's a family revenge plot. So to me it seems to make sense, like in like a lot of like Scream logic. There seems to be a lot of psychotic people in the world of Scream. But like, especially if you kill a a psycho who's killing everybody else, but they have a family, you should expect those people to come back around and tear shit up. So so yeah, I mean, I thought it was a fine reveal. I liked that they kind of did the whole like essentially three killers thing. Two ghost faces in the same scene was also kind of fun. I mean, I guess we've technically seen multiple ghost face. There's lots of costumes everywhere, but actually having two specific killers in the costume. They did have me slightly convinced for a second. I was like, wait, Kirby is the killer?
Yeah.
I
I was
thought
about to be so mad if that
Same.
was
I was
the
like,
case.
yeah. I was like, I think you're going for that, and then they didn't. But so I'm overall pretty happy with the reveal of the movie.
I'm happy as well. I know like online people were saying like, oh, I really wanted it to be Stu, So I try to go in like with an open mind completely. And I went to go check it out with my husband, and he's like, oh, I think I know who it is. And he actually knew. And I was like, when he first told me, I'm like, girl, please, how do you know? But clearly he was right. And then kind of like what what was said already, like it as you're watching, when you think back on it, it's kind of clear because they kind of say it, but it just went over my head. So no, I was like really surprised by it. And I love the fact that there was like three of them, because again, this is like a family type of thing. We never had, well, we had a family, but three people, like, wow, I don't know. It's just really cool.
Yeah, I feel the more I've watched it, the more I love it. Because I love that they all kind of get their own little campy ridiculousness, crazy Miss Loomis moments. But I think, I think, the way I saw it is like an homage to two in that regard. But I think further, one thing that's being kind of glossed over it, and I've seen some people say like, well, these movies are about commentary and blah blah blah, and they're not commenting on anything. And I was just like, the movie, I think that's not correct at all. Like, I think, the last movie really obviously tackled toxic fandom, but this movie, I think, really touches a lot on the like court of public opinion and the idea that you can destroy someone's reputation so easily now. You can cancel people, and all you need is a video clip of them attacking some girl in the street, which is like what they try to do to Sam. And they even say that so much. It was kind of like, killing you is not enough. Like, we wanted to ruin your life first and then kill you. So I think that's really I think that's really a great way of weaving in the family revenge with some commentary on things that are very much relevant right now. And I really try to avoid, like, I unmuted like all the scream words on Twitter, so that way because I was avoiding spoilers. And now I just want to mute them again, because I'm just like, I don't know that I want to have this discourse on Twitter. Right. So this is a lovely place to talk about that. But yeah, no, I was very happy with it. And again, it plays better every time. There's so many lovely one-liners, and like Liana Liberato as Quinn, like, I think I just love her energy. She's great. And yeah, and I think Dermot Mulroney, I don't think I've ever seen him be this like ridiculously unhinged, and it was just such a joy.
He's usually someone's loving dad or husband.
Yeah.
I know. Yeah, we were in the theater, just like, I'm loving this Rudy, like, what is happening?
And he still looks good.
So yes, he does. And yeah, I love that you brought up the court of public opinion. I think that's a really interesting thing too, because there's also, I feel like they're saying it without saying it too, about carrying on Richie's movie. It's like this spoiled white kid, right? And here they're taking a person of color and trashing her, and it's very easy because people are like maybe quick to believe it. Like that dynamic isn't ever specifically called out. But there's a lot of things like that Sam says about Richie that make me feel like she's basically saying that it's like, okay, you're this entitled white boy who wanted to, like, his vision of, wanted his vision of things. And here your family feels entitled now to ruin my life because he didn't get what he wanted. And so I think there is a lot of interesting layers to that you could spend time dissecting.
And the delusions of him, like watching that fan film, like being projected, and it's so bad. And it's just like all of that. I just love that. I think it just really sells that point.
And you know what's crazy is like, and I know we already talked about 5, but like let's think about it, because where we are and you know with 6 and everything, he really found her, started dating her, had a whole relationship with her just for all that. Like that is
Yeah.
so psychotic and like
Yeah, sick.
pathetic. Like
Pathetic, yes.
Yeah. And I also found it interesting how Amber is glossed over. I don't know, like she was she was working with Richie on, but they kept saying Richie's movie. And it is his family, granted, but even in the start, the two like nerds, right, that are like trying to kill people and finish Richie, they say finish Richie's movie. They don't say finish Richie and Amber's movie. So I think there was
Right.
like another interesting layer of like there's all this like entitlement for these like white men.
Even though she did
Mhm.
more of the killing, it
Yeah,
seems so.
she did, and she did the big one. She did Dewey.
Mhm.
Like, so I think that's something I'm interested to see if they continue to explore. Because I did see some comment. I think it was from Patrick Lussier, who did the editing for a lot of the Scream films, said something like, I really saw this franchise as like women like becoming the victims and having to put up with a bunch of men's shit and then throwing it right back at them. And I'm like, that feels even more. He was commenting about the earlier films, and I feel like that's even becoming more and more true as the franchise evolves. And I know we're almost at time here, so I do want to wrap it up with asking like any thoughts, predictions for Scream 7, which has just been announced, or any wishes for the future. Where do you want it to go? Any hopeful thinking?
I'm excited about it, but I'm also stressed, like because you know I don't want to lose anyone, none of the legacy characters, none of the new characters, you know, because I've grown to love them, and it's just like, why don't we just get new people and maybe you can kill the new ones,
Just kill them all.
a whole new cast.
That's kind of what they did in this one, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know what I want exactly out of the next one. I would like to see some really good subversion of our expectations. They mention doing that, and they kind of, in doing that, they threw me off with the Scream 2 style ending. I was like, oh, you guys aren't going to do that, and then you did. I was like, oh, okay. But I would love to see like further subversion of expectations within the franchise. And I mean, if they continue this track of Scream 5 is Scream 1, Scream 6 is Scream 2. I mean, that's a very basic generalization. But if Scream 3 is going to equate to Scream 7, like we had Sydney's brother be the killer, would we have Samantha and Tara showdown, but in a different type of dynamic? I don't think they're going to do that, but that's something they could do if they continue that kind of like representation.
Yeah, I would love to see some more subversion. I basically, the way I approach it is like anything that I could think of, I want you to do something different, because
Yeah.
I don't want to have, because I think that the series has actually done a pretty good job of that. Like there have been so many prevailing fan theories every film, and some of them have carried over, and they maybe like refer to them now more, or they're like more like cheeky about it, but they never quite lean into what the fans think. And sometimes like doing the opposite, which even if it is like, well, they won't do Scream 2 again, and then they do like the revenge thing, it's kind of like that's kind of the new subversion now.
Yeah.
And so I think with this one, it really does kind of open the door for something completely different, because this is kind of like a pretty big nudge into a new vibe for a Scream movie, that now, because people have responded so well to it and the new characters, they really have carte blanche to do something wacky if they wanted to. But I think I would love to see maybe a couple more legacy characters brought back. Like I would love to see Sydney return if it made sense narratively. I'd love to see Gail return if it made sense narratively. I definitely would want Kirby back. I thought having her back in this was just a really great energy, and seeing her get her moment at the end and her redemption a bit from getting stabbed and left for dead was just great. And so, yeah, I think I think I just want to continue seeing though these creators honor, you know, what we love about it, and giving us good character stuff and giving us people to continue to care about, and then giving us some heartbreak. I think at this point they're probably gonna, you know, break our hearts a bit with the next one, and I think that's probably okay. I think that I want to say, I think it was Jamie or it was one of the producers, but one of them said, you know, we really want to give people the screen that they need and not necessarily the one that they want. And I
Yeah.
think that, you know, not that that's being presumptuous, that, you know, or whatever,
Yeah.
but I think in general that like that's a good
Yeah.
way to look at it. It's like, yes, anything that we could think of, being so protective of these people we love and saying kill every, you know, like Zena was alluding to, like it does hurt, you know, like I don't want to see these people die, but realistically at this point some of them have to die. So maybe the next one will be a lot of familiar faces, and so there's no escaping it, like people we love are going to die. So yeah, I'm really curious to see what they'll do, but I'm excited but also stressed out. Zena, I feel you on that. I don't know. I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm nervous.
Yeah. We'll live in a
I mean,
perpetual state of stress for a while, it sounds like.
yeah. I mean, we're in a franchise that's commenting on franchises. Like, when are they going to talk about space? That's all I'm asking.
Yes, I'm with you on that. It needs to be brought up or addressed in some way. That
Yeah.
seems critical. Well, I do want to thank you all so much. This has been a really fun discussion. I'm happy to talk Scream with all of you anytime, anywhere. Name the place, I'm there. As we sign off, would love it if you if there's anything you want to like direct people to online, social media, or an article maybe you wrote recently about Scream, for example, feel free to give your shout outs, and we'll start with Ari.
Yeah, so I love connecting with folks, especially other Scream slasher fans. I'm a big found footage geek too. So if you like any of that, please feel free to connect with me, or if you just want to connect and argue with me, I don't know. I won't argue back, but you can argue all you want. On Twitter and Instagram, you can find me at the Ari Drew, TheAridrew, and check me out on Bloody Disgusting. I have recently my interview with Jamie Vanderbilt and William Chirac, who's one of the producers, went up this last week, and I have some other kind of found footagey fun stuff that I'm covering that's pretty cool that I hope people will check out. And yeah, I mean, I'm just happy to connect with anyone, and I've had a wonderful time here with y'all tonight.
Zena?
Cool. Well, yeah, I had so much fun talking to you guys about this. It felt good, really, just, you know, letting it all out and everything. But you can find me online if you want to. I don't know your life. On Twitter, Lovely Zena, and then Instagram, Real Queen of Horror. If you want to see more of my face, I'm on YouTube, Real Queen of Horror. Or if you don't want to see my face, you can listen to the Bloody Disgusting podcast.
I want to do all the things. All right, and Ben.
You can find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Letterboxd at Monster Popcorn. And then you can hear my voice on the Dead Ringers podcast, deadringerspodcast.com, and all of the major podcast outlets. And if you ever just like want to talk about limited edition flavor Oreos, I'm here too. So you know, that works.
Got it. Well, again, thank you all. And go check out all their stuff. We'll put some show notes probably in the YouTube description as well once this gets uploaded. But thank you all, and have a good night.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks everyone.
See you.
A lot of fun.